don't worry, just join in as you can. Hi everyone. I was on the first session, I wasn't on last week, so there's anyone here that I've not met before. I'm ARC Director of England. I'm really glad to have you here today for the last session in this series of 3. I'm going to hand over to David now, who's going to do a summary of the past few weeks, and then get on with today's session with Stephen, Michelle and Clive. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving up your third lunchtime on a Friday in a row to be with us. It's very much appreciated, you know, we feel, having heard the responses and feedback from people after the first 2 webinars, that this is an important area and subject for consideration. So we feel at this point in time that it's been worth going through our conversations, and we very much look forward to how today turns out. Very subtle difference today. We've only got 2 questions for this week, the same panelists, Stephen, Clive and Michelle, and we're hoping that will give us more time to have a conversation. If you've been thinking over the 2-3 weeks of what questions you might have or challenges you might want to put, and also where you might want this to go further. We've had catch-ups at midweek after each webinar, and one of the things we were talking about this last Wednesday was, you know, what can we do? Because clearly people are interested in autism in the workplace for reasons that are slightly refreshed from the traditional way of looking at things, and the conversations are leading us to think that there is more that Sam and Victoria and others will do in ARC with this, perhaps a piece of work within the research group. So, you know, it's your webinar. We provide the answers to questions as stimulation for you to reflect and think and ask deeper questions of us. If we can answer, we will. So in the first week, if you recall, those of you who were kind enough to join us then, we looked at different perspectives, we looked at policy considerations, we looked at sensory differences and asked ourselves questions about those. Last week was very much about how you focus, routines and creativity. I particularly found the creativity conversation interesting because it came out very clear about how different forms of creativity are as inherent in the autistic community, if we can say it that way, as in any other part of, as Stephen will keep reminding us, the whole neurodiverse community, which is every human on the planet. And for me, that was a really rich conversation and sort of highlighted some interesting thought. So from our perspective this week, we're very much, we're looking at 2 questions, double empathy and the problem with communication associated with that, and that'll be interesting. And we're also looking at when our panelists were diagnosed, what did it mean for them and others, you know, whether that's little things or big things or all things. Those are the questions. We've also got that checklist where we need to ask ourselves whether we've explored the aspects of diagnosis, the challenges in an organization. That's challenges for the individual, the autistic individual, but also challenges for the employer and how the employer behaves in that context. And whether we've explored enough in terms of the positive aspects of what autism means to the employment world and just how powerful an organization is when it's got such a diverse group of people working in the organization. And we also wanted to, and you know, it's you to tell us whether we've done it or not, to explore subtleties in terms of processing differences, of sensory differences, of communication and relationship differences, and then of routines, you know. And as Clive reminded us on a number of occasions, his routines are fine for him. Don't give him one of yours because he'll kick it into the park. You know, that's how it works. So on that, as a very summarized summary of what we've talked about, is much more than that over the last 2 weeks. We're going to see if we can get going with this and give us some time to have a real deep conversation And we can overrun again. I think we've also decided on Wednesday the overrun bit worked very well. So if you want to stay on after 12 and continue conversation, please don't feel you have to go. We'll hang around and be part of that with you. So we're going to start. I won't ask them to introduce themselves before we go into the questions, because you've done the introductions twice already. As you answer the question first time, just remind everybody who you are and what's unique about you, I think, is what I would challenge you with today. And you're not allowed to say it's because of your autism. That's just one thing. What's the other thing that you're unique about, that's unique about you? And we'll start with Stephen this time. And so the first question is, what is the double empathy problem, and how can it affect communication at work, Stephen? And I know you've looked at this in great detail, so I'm expecting a very, very lucid answer from you.
I'm Steve, work for Real Life Options, and I'm the numbers guy. Nothing unique about that. It's probably your stereotypical autistic job, but that's where I've found myself to be. But my unique thing is the number 9. We'll maybe get some time on that later on, but that is my unique special interest, is the number 9. But we'll maybe get round to that. The double empathy problem is probably one of the most important and powerful tools for an autistic person to understand. It was first posited in the Ontological Status of Autism by Damien Milton back in 2011, 2012, and it's basically it's characterized as a reciprocal lack of bidirectional communication styles as being the kind of fundamental premise of social interaction differences for autistic people. Now, what does that really mean? Basically, autistic people and non-autistic people communicate differently. They process and they understand and they formulate communication differently. And that is the basis for the social interaction difficulties that autistic people face when dealing with non-autistic people. Tony Attwood very famously said, there is a cure for autism. You can cure autism tomorrow. Just kill the neurotypical population. Leave the autistic guys to it. They'll be absolutely fine. It's the neurotypicals that mess everything up for them. And it stands true. And the thing is, when Damien Milton first proposed it, he was told he didn't know what he was talking about. Now, he's a doctor of sociology. He is autistic. He has 2 autistic daughters. He kind of knows a thing or two about being autistic. But it wasn't until Edinburgh University picked up on his research and did stuff with diffusion chains. Used to be called Chinese whispers when we were younger. And they did a group of autistic, a group of non-autistic people, and a group of mixed. And they gave them the same things, and they marked it, and they had it all worked out, and they showed that the non-autistic group and the autistic group results were roughly the same. It wasn't until they were mixed that they became wildly different. And it's simply down to the process of language and how that's communicated to each other is different. So autistic people generally tend to know when they're in the company of other autistic people inherently. And so it's almost like a little radar of, oh, right, okay, I understand this person. Right, okay, I'm getting this conversation here. I know what's going on. I know how they're phrasing that. And there is a language between autistic people that sounds very much like everybody else's language, but there are key differences. And autistic people are almost fine-tuned into that, and they'll get on better and they'll tend to communicate better with other autistic people. Neurotypical people tend to communicate with other neurotypical people on a better level because there is that shared commonality, that shared empathy. Because for the best will in the world, as much as you try, a neurotypical person will never know what it's like to be autistic. But by the same token, an autistic person will never know what it's like to be neurotypical. And it's that empathy, and that's where the double empathy comes in. And it's that commonality that is different. And this is why a lot of people now, and I'm one of these people, I have to admit, that do not see autism as so much as a diagnosis, as a culture. It's a shared identity that we have with a lot of other people. Although we're all unique and we're all different in our own way and we experience autism differently, we have a commonality and we have a culture within us, and we gravitate towards that culture. So how does that affect the workplace? That's a difficulty, you know. It is a difficulty because unless you have other autistic people within that workplace, you're going to feel quite isolated, and it can be a very isolating experience. However, if you have people that try to at least understand the culture, understand your perspective, you do get somewhat towards that, but it's never quite on the same level. It's never quite the same, and you feel that kind of isolation quite innately, or at least I did. You know, but until I understood that I was autistic, but I always felt quite alone in the workplace. I never felt like that connection, you know. In fact, I would go as far as to say one of the loneliest times of my life was in a room full of people.
Yeah. So question that I'll ask all three of you, which is probably a little bit naughty, but I think it needs to be asked, because the standard stock organization, if such a thing exists, is likely to lump an approach to support autistic people under an EDI strategy or something. What's your view, Stephen? And Clive and Michelle, you can answer this in your questions. What's your view in terms of how non-effective, if I put a bit of bias into it, that can be?
It can be, because there is this idea that you are singling out that particular group of people. What organizations need to take on board is the fact that small changes benefit everybody, not just the autistic person. They benefit the whole. You know, it should never be the case that I have to fill out a form to get some kind of reasonable adjustment. That's what a horrific way to treat a person. You know, you have to prove that you require this simple adjustment to that's not going to affect your output in any way, shape, or form. You know, so there was a comment from the last one, for example, about perhaps not relating to a person's workplace because of how dynamic it is. What you do in that kind of situation is you look for the things that you can make as predictable as possible. You're not going to be able to predict every environment. That would be ridiculous to assume that of any company. But there would be things that within that environment that you can say, well, we always do the laundry on a Wednesday. We always do this at this time. We always do that at that time. Let's structure that. Let's format that so people actually understand when they're coming in and they have particular tasks they have to do. Because that allows more spoons to deal with the unpredictable stuff. You know, if you've got a set rota pattern, if you've got a set things that get done on particular days, then those are the ones that get done on those days. And it just enables the person. So that I think when it comes to EDI and things like that, it's great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing it in any way, shape, or form, but remember, it's not for that particular subset of people. It benefits everybody. And it always takes me back to that picture of the guy shoveling the snow at the school. And there's a guy in a wheelchair waiting to get up the ramp. And he says to him, look, I'll clear the stairs and then I'll clear the ramp. And the guy in the wheelchair goes, well, clear the ramp. We can all use it.
Yeah, spot on. Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen. Rich insight and lucid as expected. Moving over to Clive then, same question, Clive. Double empathy problem. How does it affect communication at work? What's your perception and experience of it?
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think part of the hypothesis argues that non-autistic people tend to process sentences as a whole unit of information, whereas autistic people tend to process words as a whole unit of information, and that's quite an important difference. An example of that's often given is the question, do you like potatoes? A non-autistic person might say, yeah, maybe, yeah, sure, yeah, I kind of like potatoes. I'm already thinking, what sort of potatoes? How are they cooked? When are we eating them? And there's a lot of questions for me around that. And I guess the best example for me is on a daily basis, whenever I talk to my wife, she will start a conversation with me. She'll start talking about something, and I know my brow is furrowed, because I'm immediately thinking, hang on, you feel like you've started this conversation halfway through. What about this? What about that? Where's all this detail? That without that detail, I can't get with the conversation. And she hasn't done anything of the sort. She hasn't started the conversation halfway through. She's just communicating in a different way. And for me, I'm stuck because I haven't got the detail. And without the detail, my brain will not. I can't be in the conversation because it doesn't work for me. I can't follow it because I'm missing all of this information. And she will then have a furrowed brow, thinking, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, it's got everything to do with it because I need that detail. In terms of the EDI question, I think it's obviously well-meaning, David, and I think when organisations are trying to do this with autistic people, to support autistic people, it's obviously well-meaning. But somebody once said to me, if you come to me in any route other than through my autism, you don't reach me. And so I think there's something specific about the communication conversation we're having and how you reach that person. And if you do that, you're making the adjustment. So there isn't necessarily a need for formalizing that. It's actually probably more about understanding those communication differences and communicating with the person through their autism, learning how to do that. And then I think you probably don't need the pieces of paper that Stephen's talking about. I don't know if my fellow panelists would agree with that, but that would be my perspective.
Thank you. I'm sure they'll say so in a bit. So moving over to Michelle, same question again, Michelle, double empathy challenge and communication in the organisation, and then my little add-on question about EDI.
Yeah, I just wanted to invite Clive. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, there's
Well
me not
done.
introduced myself. Sorry, for those who don't know me, my name's Clive Parry. I'm an autistic adult, got my diagnosis at 59. That was fun. And in terms of my unique quality, I don't know, I'm a bit of a closet petrol head. I don't know if that's unique, but I think we're in the minority these days, and rightly so, probably. But yeah, does that answer the question, Michelle? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well done, Michelle.
I knew that was going to happen, and it's normally me. I'm Michelle Rebello. I do the social media for Dimensions. I also have my own group called Minecraft and Meltdowns. And unique thing about me is, well, I've got a book, so buy my book. There you go, plug done. I am an absolute plane nut. Military aircraft. There's
Ooh.
me with my dress, with my cake in a cafe crocheting, but I'll be watching Big Jet TV, or I'll be looking at ADSB and seeing what plane just went past. Yeah, Matt's like, yes. So yeah, absolutely, you will completely misunderstand me if you don't understand that I absolutely love air shows and loud noise, only at certain points. But yeah, so in terms of communication, I think a lot of what our community do, and I've had to remember, I've learned a lot through my own group, Minecraft and Meltdowns, is that we often, the people who can speak are the ones who speak. And a lot of the autistic community don't use words to communicate. A lot of people don't use words to communicate, or they communicate in different ways or different styles. Selective mutism is a massive problem. In my family, we also had to learn Makaton because my 3-year-old got so frightened of preschool that she stopped talking. So it was a way to take the attention away from the face and start looking at hands and starting to get communication going in a different way. So we're all happy on the panel chatting away, and I could listen to Steve and Clive forever. It's just incredible. But yeah, I just wanted to put a shout out there for people who don't use words to communicate. And there's a lot of people using technology like text to speech and things like that, which my son uses when he's stuck at a train station panicking because the train got cancelled and he needs help from the guard, and he's so panicked he can't talk anymore. So that's a big issue with communication. I would totally agree that autistic people, we can talk perfectly well with ourselves, with each other. I'm talking to the panel in our other meetings, completely easy. Talking to a lot of people I work with, absolutely comes easy. And I think we give each other a kind of empathy. So for example, I will say things like, you don't have to answer now, but what did you think of? And it's just that permission to have thinking time, or tell me later, or me saying I'm not trying to put you on the spot. So I think there's an understanding in the autistic community that if we go quiet, it's okay. Silences are okay. Talking is okay. Info dumping is okay. And we're not going to get that thing that we got all the way through school, which was getting told stop doing this and stop doing that. There's a lot of misunderstandings and assumptions that we have to deal with. I was in a positive behaviour support meeting before this, and they were saying presumed competence, and I just loved that phrase, because a lot of the time, especially when people are struggling in a train station and they can't talk, absolutely presume they know what they're talking about, or they just need a little guidance, but they're not idiots, and if they're taking longer to think, it's because they're thinking about more things, not less things. Communication for me is, I'm a visual learner, so give me timetables, graphs, write it in an email so I can remember what you said or what I agreed to. Give me anything visual, a PowerPoint, whatever. If people just ask me information, I've got all these notes because I'm trying to remember all these extra questions that David keeps throwing in. And I've got notes from the questions I've planned to answer, and because I will just forget when I'm put on the spot. It doesn't matter how long I've known you. I know your name, I know your family, I know everything about you, but if I have to introduce you at a party, I will have completely forgotten your name in that instant. It's that spotlight going on you that you think, and all of your brain has gone, all of your memories have gone, you're just in panic. So one thing I say is, if you've ever seen the films The Sixth Sense, autistic people see other autistic people walking around like regular people. Some don't know they're autistic, and it's exactly the same for us. We diagnose people long before they've worked out where they stand, and we've been over this in a previous webinar about how you can't, you have to wait for people to want to go down that path of recognition. You can't just launch it on people. And with the EDI thing, totally agree with what the panelists have said before, so I won't repeat it. But in my 9 years at Dimensions, I've only recently filled in that awful form. Before that, people just understood or just asked me what I needed or worked with me using our one-page profiles, things like that. The form is disabling. It's like filling in a DLA form. It's a couple of hours of talking about what you're bad at and what's awful, and how the rest of the team needs to change, or how I need to change to fit in, or blah 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 blah. It's a really negative experience for an autistic person. Absolutely. The advice I give out is small changes affect everyone. How's a timetable going to harm anybody? How is inviting people to answer later or by email, how is that going to bother anyone in the team? But it will really help the person who needs to think like that. So just quickly to end, for me, I've been enjoying watching Ellie on Strictly Come Dancing, and how easily they've put reasonable adjustments in there for her. I'm not saying she's autistic, but it can be done in such a way that is enabling for her. So they've got cardboard cutouts of the judges so that she knows where the judges will sit, and they've got names for all of the moves, silly names, like it looks like a duck, to help her remember that move. And they've done all sorts of different things in the way that they're teaching, which has been just wonderful for her, and they're working with her to put that in place. They're not asking her to fill in a form about how can we make this accessible for you. So that's absolutely how we need to be going forward.
It looks like we've lost David.
It does. It does. I don't know where he's gone.
It's probably that Teams issue that...
It probably is. It probably is. Do you want to move on to the second question then that you had prepared in advance? I don't know who was first at going for the feedback for the next bit. It wouldn't be you, Stephen, would it? So
probably be Clive, I think, on this occasion.
Clive. So do you want to share what the second question was?
Yeah, sure. The second question was we were going to ask the panelists to talk about the point at which they were diagnosed. So you've got 3 panelists here who have been diagnosed, and this question was just about the diagnosis experience. So I did touch on it a little earlier when I talked about getting my diagnosis at 59. I guess a big part of that experience was a kind of knowing but not knowing. So it was part of me completely really surprised to find that I was autistic, and another part of me not in the slightest surprised. And I know those two things seem contradictory, but they do seem to coexist. So I think it's probably the sort of cognitive side of it, the understanding side of it. I was really surprised, but intuitively I wasn't surprised, because it made a lot of things make sense. So I said I got my diagnosis at 59. And I think part of that was I have had to let go of the idea of there ever being a non-autistic version of me. I have lived my life without that knowledge, 59 years of my life without knowing consciously that I was autistic. And that person doesn't exist. That person who is not autistic never existed. And that was a weird thing to process, because obviously we have processing differences. So I'm probably still processing that, actually. So it was very late in my life to get the diagnosis. I'd say for people who might be thinking about getting a diagnosis, it's obviously very much a personal choice, but I would say it was probably one of the most positive things to ever happen to me. It made a lot of things fall into place. There's a lot of thinking of, oh, okay, now I know why that happened. Now I know why this is happening to me. Now I know why this person is reacting in this way. And it's given me permission to say to people, I'm autistic, and you might see that in my communication style. So when people are looking at me with a slightly perplexed look on their face, which frankly is all the time, it seems. Actually it feels like for non-autistic people are constantly looking at me thinking, what? I'm looking at them thinking, what, as well. That's the conversation we've just had about the communication differences. I can actually now say, oh right, I'm autistic, so I maybe the way I'm communicating it might seem very direct to you, and I might be digging into the detail. If that's not helpful, we can have a conversation about that. So it's given me permission to share that with people where that's felt appropriate. I've had huge support from people. I know that Stephen talked about this in the first webinar, but I'd argue that I've kind of found my tribe. Actually, I had already found them because I was working in learning disability and autism services and probably didn't understand why I was attracted to there. But it's given me a sense of belonging. Stephen talked about feeling lonely, and I think this has been a significant shift for me, because I feel I belong somewhere, and I don't think I ever felt that before. So for me, the process was, it's not to say it's without its challenge. There is a coming to terms with the idea that I'm autistic. There is something about that, and doing that very late in life. So I'm not saying that's necessarily easy, but overall, on balance, it was easily one of the most positive things for me to do. And I hope people who might be thinking about getting a diagnosis or getting an assessment, if you're thinking about that, I hope that that's encouraging to some people, because for me, it's so positive to have had that diagnosis, and to be meeting people like Michelle and Steve and others, and having a very different conversation knowing that I'm autistic than I might have had not knowing that I'm autistic, if that makes sense. So I hope some of that's useful.
Great.
Thanks, Clive. Really useful. Thank you.
Apologies there, my internet decided to play. It heard the conversation about Teams and thought, I know what I can do, and went funny. So Clive, had you answered the second question first in the panel?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so it's over to Stephen then.
Yeah, and see, I don't think that my diagnosis was as powerful as my realization, because my diagnosis only really followed on from my realization. But I had a very similar experience to Clive, in as much as that coming to terms with it and coming to understand it, and then realizing that the person, that non-autistic person, never existed, was never there. But I had to go through almost like a period of mourning for that person. I had to go through a period where it was like, well, that version of who I thought I was actually was never there. And it's almost it's a very vulnerable position to be in at that stage, and you just feel almost naked, and you're pushed out in front of everyone. You're like, oh my God, like, what is this? And then, but very quickly, it was a case of everything started slotting into place. Things started dropping in, and they still do. You know, every time a memory pops up, and you think, all right, okay, yeah, I can see why I lost 9 hours looking at something. You know, 9 hours of my life disappeared because I really got into something, you know. And it is a thing, but then it made me also realize why I gravitated towards certain things. So one of my big things, one of my other special interests is martial arts. And I can see why I gravitated towards martial arts, because it's very rigid, it's very structured. You knew where you stood, you knew what you were wearing. You know, you knew the person that was to your left and to your right. You knew everything about the whole setup of going into that. And that was where I found my quiet place when I was younger. So I started when I was 11, so it's been a long, long time. But when I went in there was nothing else mattered. Everything outside was gone. You didn't talk to anybody either, which was fantastic. I didn't have that whole awkward "what's the weather doing" conversation. You know, the weather's weathering today, or didn't have to deal with the small talk. You just lined up, you did your stuff, and that was the beauty of it. And I think and it made me realize, upon my realization, why I gravitated towards that kind of strict linear kind of working. And so for me, it was very much a case of, it was the understanding of being autistic, and then everything kind of came after that. But it was a massive moment for me. But it was more on a personal thing, because the way others have been with me hasn't changed. It's more how I've been with them, and my understanding of my role within that conversation has changed. I am starting to pick up slightly more on the kind of social cues now, when people are bored listening to my special interest for the 10,000th time. Slightly, not much though, because I still have to script it out, and I still have to get to the end of that script. And don't interrupt that script, so I can get through and get away, So yeah, but I would say more so for myself, for my, and I have found since the understanding of that, my anxiety and my depression are way better than they ever have been. I do have moments still, but in terms of that understanding, because I no longer look at people and go, well, that's what I should be,
That's powerful, Stephen. And Stephen will never admit to you knowingly just how good he is at martial arts. He knows that I know, because I've looked at it. He's good. He's one of the best, is what I would say. And he'll never tell you that, but I'm telling you that. Thank you, Stephen. I think that's a fantastic insight. So, Michelle, I'm with you on the big planes stuff and the little planes. So, as a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, I was fascinated by the SR-71 Blackbird, and I still am, and still wonder why they can't build something that faster. Imagine flying something that can fly faster than most missiles. I mean, that's wonderful, isn't it? Anyway, that's not what we're talking about.
Oh, it's very
today.
Cool. Yeah, let's have another webinar on planes. I asked to touch it once, and the very heavily armed American security guards sitting around it said, "No, ma'am." My kids think that's hilarious.
Yeah, don't touch that titanium.
In my diagnosis, I got diagnosed at 42. So I have this real issue with people saying there are so many more autistic people today. There are so many more people getting diagnosed, as if it's like a fad. So many parents are getting diagnosed now. I got diagnosed after my 3 children because my eldest was just like me, had the same school reports, and I obviously couldn't see anything wrong with them, and there still isn't anything wrong with them. But it was only when they struggled at teenage years and after their younger brother had been diagnosed that I'd actually started researching and found out who on earth Asperger was. So a lot of parents are coming to that realization themselves. I think that I'm also ADD, which is a inattentive type of ADHD. So I don't have the hyperactivity. I struggle to concentrate, hence the notes. But the process, like you were saying, Stephen, like yeah, you come to this realization. Yeah, that's probably the case. But the process of getting diagnosed is up to 2 years long. So that's just formality at the end of it. It's that decision to get diagnosed that's the big thing. And because it was such an ordeal, and because I really understand myself, I haven't gone for the ADHD diagnosis bit. So what I struggle with is people not wanting to diagnose, especially children these days, because they'll give them a label. But if you don't find out how they think, then you can't play to their strengths. And the other labels they'll get are the ones I got through school, which was over talkative, daydreamer, not paying attention, all these sorts of negative labels that were applied onto me because there wasn't autism in my day. It's only been a couple of generations back. Hans Asperger was working in this in the war, and the diagnostic criteria sort of was really being formed around in the 70s. So it's always been there. Take a look at some of our scientists and crazy eccentric kings, and I say if I'd been around in the Middle Ages, I definitely would have been burnt as a witch, because it was anyone who thought differently, anyone who wanted to go live on their own and play with flowers and collect cats. We've always been there, but now we have understood how to find this out. So for me, when I got diagnosed, I had an immediate not an immediate breakdown, but I had a breakdown afterwards. And I was so angry looking back at my life because of the lack of support I'd had. Especially, I left home at 12. I had a really terrible time, and I had no support, and I fell victim to narcissistic people because I was vulnerable and a people pleaser, because I'd spent my whole life getting told horrible things about myself. So I did my best to cope with that trauma, to please people and to do my very best and work really hard. It's almost like, when you watch a film and it's got a massive twist, like The Sixth Sense, and then you watch that film again knowing the twist and it's a completely different film. And that's exactly what it is. You go back through your life and say, oh my gosh, when that teacher said this, or when this happened to me, or when I made that poor decision, you can absolutely see that if you'd had some support around that time, things would have been completely different. So being diagnosed means you are kinder to yourself. So you say, all right, yeah, I'm going to have a busy day this day, but I'm going to have a day off the next day, or I'm going to take it easy, or I'm not going to have any meetings, or I'm going to work flexibly, or I'm going to be more assertive in meetings and say, actually, that wouldn't work for me. Can I have this instead? So it's that being kind to yourself and understanding yourself and bringing up other people, like you were saying. It's not It was difficult for everyone around me to understand, especially parents, because they thought that they were lacking in some way for not knowing this, which of course they couldn't have known. But of course then they felt guilty, and I kept getting asked, are you sure you're autistic, or you don't look autistic, and all these horrible things. I didn't realize there was a dress code, by the way, so I don't know if anyone knows it, but apparently I don't look autistic. So if you know what the dress code is, let me know. But yeah, so now I embrace me, and I embrace people who think differently, or autistic or otherwise. Everyone's got a role to play in our society.
Wow, powerful stuff. Thank you to all three of you for in the last few weeks pouring out your hearts It's not always easy, but it really has opened up points of conversation. So we have now about 20 minutes plus any time longer that people want to answer those burning questions, or at least have those discussions about points that people have been mulling over the last few weeks, and things that may have been prompted to you in the presentations from each of our panelists this afternoon, early afternoon. So I'm going to open it up now, and feel free to put your hand up and and say, and if I miss a hand, Sam, just prompt, because I can't see everybody on my screen. And we'll, if that's a comment, a question or observation, whatever it is that you want to bring forward within the context of the discussion that we've had over the last 3 weeks, I think it's time to go for it. Okay, Matthew, you've put your hand up.
I was just going to ask the panelists, what's your thoughts for the future for people with autism? And my second question would be, are you scared with the announcements and the way certain things are going? Do you think it should be better announced so that people have a better understanding?
Anybody want to pick that one up?
I'll go start with that one. What I'll do is I'll start with the announcements, Matthew, if that's okay. I think we're in a very dangerous time, and watching people like RFK and people like that, you're watching eugenics in action.
Yeah.
And I think it is the duty and the responsibility of everybody, not just autistic people, but everybody, to stand up against that narrow-minded, thoughtless, reactionary, idiotic behaviour. But I did have to say I saw a little glimmer of light, which was one of the most wonderful commentaries I've ever seen on a subject like that. And it was a simple line on X, I think it was, that said, "I'd rather be autistic than an idiot." And I thought, you know what, that just sums that whole thing up beautifully. What are my hopes in the future? I don't really have that kind of foresight to have those kind of hopes. I'm more interested in what's happening here and now. I don't know if the panelists are like this as well, but future plans for me are a difficult concept to try and grab a hold of. So it's very much about the here and now. And what I have to say is what I find heartening and encouraging are how people are looking at autism differently. They're no longer pigeonholing autism the way they did. Back in the sort of Asperger and Leo Kanner days, it was called the frigid mother syndrome. And there was this whole stigma that went along, with that kind of idea. And I actually heard that being said by a GP no more than a couple of years ago. So we aren't fully away from that kind of idea, but more and more people are starting to understand. People are out there and talking about it. And this is why it looks like there are more autistic people than there's ever been. Like it's some kind of, really, I don't know what the word that they use, epidemic, I think, or, out of control and all this nonsense. And it really isn't. All that it is that we're getting better at describing the human condition. That's all it is. There's no more than that. But just one thing on it though, when we were talking about the non-verbal thing, what really struck me, and this really hit home to me, is a guy called Jason Ardy, who is a professor at Cambridge University. He was the youngest ever professor. He does a lot on intersectionality, and he's well worth looking up. Jason Ardy. He couldn't talk until he was 12, and he couldn't read or write until he was 18. Never equate intelligence with the ability to do something like that. Yeah. Because the two are never the same. And that part there really gives me hope moving forward, that eventually we'll understand people's real potential.
Brilliant.
Thank you. I'd like to say something. I mean, first of all, what he said. But yeah, recently I heard from a what's the one above doctor? Forgotten the word. Consultant. Everyone's a little bit autistic. Oh, that's one of my favourites. Yeah, I know. Ooh. No, just because you have backache, you're not a little bit pregnant. It's just because you like timetables or have some of the things that can be associated with autism. It's not the same, and it's not the same experience. And the problem with the language like that is you're trying to belittle what autism is. And this whole epidemic, all these sorts of phrases, it's like autism is a disease, autism is a problem, people are afflicted or with it, you know, it's a problem. And it just, I mean, Autism Speaks used to say autism destroyed my child, it's taken my child. They've backed away from that kind of language now. But please don't light it up blue on any kind of day, because that's, we don't support eugenics. Autism Speaks raises a lot of money to pay for research into genetics with that eugenics in mind, and also for curing autism and all these sorts of things. This recent nonsense from Donald J. Trump, it's only to distract everyone from the Epstein files, because he knows the autistic community will get up in arms about getting called things like this. But the problem with the language is it needs to be cured, and it absolutely doesn't. There have been a lot of studies happening now which are looking at, they think the possible, I mean, autism is a literal brain development. It is literally different in our brains. You can look at scans of how autistic people think, and it's completely different to other people. And they're thinking that perhaps there's a link to Neanderthals. So where the two branches of human beings branched off from Neanderthals, and they're looking at perhaps it's just a difference in the brain. There's also a train of thought to answer your question about what comes next, Matt, which is autistic people are just the next evolution. And we're just around now, existing with everybody else, which kind of presumes that we're better than everyone, and I don't presume to say that. But yeah, it's a different, literally a physical difference in the brain. And it can't be cured, and it shouldn't be cured.
And the word epidemic, that whoever is using that is completely misunderstanding the context of that particular, the etymology of that word and what it means. It's completely wrong to use it in any other context other than something like COVID. Yeah. Okay. Clive, any thoughts? Not that you have to, but you may have.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Matt. I think my reaction to your question was that I see what's happening culturally. I see it. It's much broader. I think we in the West seem to be moving away from tolerance, putting effort into understanding difference, celebrating difference, and that feels like that's a backward step for me. But I don't think it's just autistic people that will necessarily experience that. So I think we're caught up in that potentially, and I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hopeful that the amount that we've understood in recent years put us in a good position to challenge some of that perhaps more ignorant thinking, or thinking that's a little bit reactionary, as Steve said, or where people seem to want to take us back to the dark ages. I think the knowledge that we have now is very different from even 20-30 years ago. So I'm hoping that with that knowledge and information and experience, and encouraging people to be themselves and talk about being themselves, that we will have quite a lot of ways to respond to that pressure, if that makes sense.
Thank you. We'll come to you in a moment, Karen. And I just wanted to make a comment, Matthew, on the back of what you were saying about the future. We should always be worried when governments of any flavor in any country start talking about ways to separate people, particularly when they start using clinical models and things to do that. You know, and you think of the organizations that we all work in and what pressures are going to come on people in future if they feel that they don't quite look or behave like other people, whatever the other is. and that they're given a legitimate option to do something different with themselves. And I'm being quite vague in what I'm saying, because you all know where I'm going. I worry about that, because our organizations in social care are all about working with people who don't fit the standard model, whatever some stupid person has decided is the standard model. And, you know, we're all in it because we believe in supporting people to be their full selves in whichever way that is in their world, and that world is part of the world. And so I have a little concern, I think, is what I would say in answer to you, even though I'm not one of the panelists. I think it's worth noting that it worries me that we've got to be careful. And I think Stephen and Michelle said it about, you know, we've got to have, our voices have to be very strong in the right places to make sure people understand that just because you are different doesn't make you less. And to Michelle's point, doesn't make you more, it makes you one of. And we're all one of. Anyway, Karen, you've got your hand up. Sorry.
Yes, I haven't put my hand down yet. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Oh, good. Sometimes people can't. So at the moment, autism is understood mainly through a pathological paradigm where the diagnostic criteria are based on a whole bunch of deficits, like a deficit in communication and so on. I've myself been looking at the neurodiversity paradigm and campaign, which looks at autism and neurodivergence through the lens of understanding that it is just a difference, as Michelle was saying. But how do we reconcile this struggle between, because I want to encourage a shift in thinking from the pathological paradigm to the we just think in a different way paradigm. How do we reconcile that struggle with actually getting the support that we do need? Because there seems to me to be a struggle between, yes, it is disabling. Society makes autism disabling, but also I do feel disabled in myself, such as for the routines. Recently, my routine was out of kilter, and I felt mentally and physically and emotionally all wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on what was happening. It was only when I changed my routine back to what it was again that I felt settled and better again. And this, so the main question is, because in this discussion, I heard some of you say, you know, I don't like this. Oh yeah, Michelle, you were saying this whole horrible form that we have to fill in, and why can't it just be done like how Ellie was on Strictly Come Dancing, where they've just put in, we don't know if she filled in a form or not, unless you've got some background information, but we don't know. She might have had to fill in a very complicated form. And also, I do think the forms can be made better, but without filling in these forms, how can we get what we need? We do need different things to the way that society gives them. We do need, it's not the same for everybody. And how do we reconcile all these, because even within us, this autistic community, I'm hearing, I feel very differently to what I've been hearing on this discussion. I feel like, oh no, they want to take away the forms and take away the help that I'm getting. I need those adjustments, I need those help, I need it to be done officially. So can you just help me with this? Michelle first, please. I choose you.
Thank you. You know, I think you're awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Karen is one of our award-winning, amazing support workers in dementia. Support worker? Is that right? Yeah. In Discovery. I just wanted to say the first thing that helped me was differentiating pathological language, clinical language, from real language. So in the same way that lawyers speak mostly in Latin, but in a different way, that is different to someone's experience of law or someone's experience of life. So yes, there's a DSM-5 and they have to tick box markers, and they have to do these things, and the language is all individuals this, which I hate, and deficits here, there and everywhere. It's kind of just accepting that that's the way it is officially done. That's the clinical process of doing that side of things, getting the diagnosis. But the real world experience is very different, and I would encourage people to join groups that if they think they might be autistic, to join groups. So one of the first things I joined was Mums on the Spectrum. So it's not talking about our autistic kids, it's mums on the spectrum. And then all the posts in this social media group were, oh my God, the time when this happened, and oh, I've just done this and I've just forgotten that. And the more I heard that, the less I felt unusual. And it's finding a tribe, like Clive says, finding your people will help you feel stronger in that. We're not advocating getting rid of any kind of adjustments or any kind of official things at work. Sometimes you have to do tick box exercises. It's just think about it like human beings and not tick boxes. You know, like I said, I've worked in Dimensions for 9 years, and I've only just recently had to fill in one of those because the other team understood me and just asked me how I prefer to work rather than what I can't do.
Clive?
Yeah, it was just to say, great question, Karen. I want to reiterate what Michelle said, and I'm sure Steve would say the same. We're not advocating for not supporting people in the ways that they need to be supported in work. In fact, the opposite. What we're arguing is that it may be possible to do that in ways that don't cause people to feel labelled or feel less than, to use David's expression. There is a whole movement around shifting away from deficit-based thinking to asset-based thinking. Our model is based on deficit, and that's through benefits, through everything. So you don't claim a benefit unless you can demonstrate the deficits. And so a guy that where I started with this was a guy called Alex Fox, who used to be the CEO at Shared Lives Plus. He's written a book called Escaping the Invisible Asylum. I've put a link in the chat. It also is a link to Shared Lives Plus. And he talks really eloquently about how we can move away from transactional care to relational care. And it's the same principle in terms of employing people. And I think that's where we're going with trying to get rid of some of the processes and paperwork where they feel unnecessarily labeling or stigmatizing, is not to remove the support, but perhaps to think about people more positively and to support people in a more positive way. So I hope some of that's useful.
Stephen?
Yeah, Karen, I would urge you to look at the work of Len Lawson, Dina Murray and Mike Lesser, who are the driving force behind something called monotropism. This is the central underlying feature of autism, but it validates autistic experience in a non-pathological way. So what it doesn't do is pathologize the autistic experience in terms of deficits and things like that. It does indicate and show where the struggles can be, because let's be honest, autism can be incredibly disabling. We don't want to get away from the fact that it can be, and that there are elements and situations where you find yourself that can be incredibly disabling. And it's not just, you know, the whole idea of the social model of disability actually came from somebody from Kent University who was going into a lecture and couldn't get into the lecture because of stairs going into the lecture theatre because he was in a wheelchair. And what he says is that I'm not the one that's disabled here. That building is disabling me. And it's another level of disability that's imposed upon people, you know, because what we have to remember is that the actual autism in itself can be incredibly powerful, but it can be incredibly disabling. And we have to be realistic about the not so good stuff that can come along with it, like the burnouts, the sensory meltdowns, sensory shutdowns, which people don't talk about. You know, I don't melt down, I shut down. So, you know, and this is a thing, and I don't realize when I'm tired. This is a thing that, you know, this interoceptive difference. So I'll just keep going and keep going and keep going until I burn out and I can't go anymore, you know, and it's a real thing. So these things are incredibly disabling. But the monotropism as a great way of looking at it without it pathologizing everything, without it being this tick box of you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, therefore you're autistic. It's much more about the way that the senses and the systems and our processing has to align for us to enable to focus in on something. And when we're in an unsafe place, we may perhaps have to do that stronger, or perhaps can't do it at all, which is where we get this sort of clash, if you like, and this expenditure of energy that really does us the damage. So, the book that Clive put in is excellent, by the way. Really good. That's one of my top 3 books to read on the subject. The other one is The Reason I Jump. If you've ever read that, it is amazing. It is an amazing book. So yeah, but I would highly recommend you look at the work of Wen Lawson. That is unfortunately the only one of the 3 of them that is still around. The other 2 have passed on, sadly, but I would definitely look at their work to help you in what you're thinking.
Thanks so much, Clive. I mean, Stephen. Sorry, Clive was in my brain because you mentioned the books you mentioned. Not for any other reason.
Of course.
Anyway, Stephen,
Yes.
can I please can you put the names that you mentioned in the chat, please?
Yeah, certainly.
I tried to get them, but I can't.
Yeah, Tina Money.
Great question and an observation, Karen. Thank you. Really good. Got them thinking, and
You're welcome.
Nice one. So we're at 1 o'clock, just after 1 now. Anybody else in the group want to raise any questions or observations? I can't see any other hands up, but now's your chance. We'll stay on. I mean, just to say thank you to you for giving up your time over the last 3 weeks. You will hear more. It's grown some legs, and it's going to go all sorts of places, I'm sure. We don't know yet. But those of you who want to stay on and continue the conversation, please do. And I'll hand over to Michelle. You've just put your hand up. Oh.
I think she might have hit the wrong button.
Oh, well, we wait. She'll come back. And yeah.
I think she was going to discuss the curly hair project books.
Yes.
For adult females in particular. It's a thing that somebody asked earlier about the traits. Oh, sorry, she's back. All right, Michelle?
Yeah, don't carry on. There are some bugs in the system though. I just wanted to very quickly say a lot of people have said that they'd like to talk to us further or ask questions. I'm happy for anyone to contact me on LinkedIn or to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm quite happy to do that.
Lovely. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. I think Samantha, are you going to be putting out our emails, our contact emails to everybody?
Yeah, we'll make the notes of the meeting available, and any references to any books or anything like that, we'll include the references and to the books as well, so people can find them easily. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, it looks like we've all talked ourselves out. One last final call for anybody who may want to say, but, or have you thought of? Now's your chance.
If I could just quickly, so obviously these 3 sessions have worked really well. People have really appreciated them, and I do think it's important that we do something after, and we don't just end there because of how valuable people have found it. So if people have got any ideas and how they'd like to move forward, something that I thought of particular was like perhaps a network for people who want to get together. We could get people to come along and talk about particular issues that people bring up. So that's something that I've thought of. But if you think of anything else, you can contact us directly with ideas if you don't want to kind of speak up now, or you want to take some time to think. about what might happen next. But I think it's really, really important that we do something afterwards. I've certainly found it really valuable myself. I don't have autism myself, but I do have ADHD. And definitely some of the things that people have shared, I'm absolutely going, yep, that applies to me as well.
Thanks, Sam. And finally, to say thank you to our panelists. Michelle, thank you. Stephen, thank you. Clive, thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating and enriching to hear your experiences. And thank you for being so honest and open in the panel, because that's not always easy for people. And, you know, it's started something going, as Sam has said, that we look forward to seeing what comes of it going forward. So thank you to everybody for their time. And enjoy what remains of your Friday afternoon. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you